If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, let me give you a rundown. Basically, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Here how it's work. Anchor lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to the most popular listening platforms, including Spotify, with a single tap. Anchor is also the only place you can publish video podcasts to Spotify. With Anchor, creators can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And the amount that you can upload on Anchor is unlimited, which is really helpful for me. And it also helps you with getting statistics for your podcast in terms of where people are listening from, so that you know how many people listen to your podcast all over the world.
Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoyed today's episodes. So the next small support group chat for NLDers or people who have learning disabilities will be in July. I haven't done one for a while because I've been busy. Sorry about that. But it will be July 16th, which is the third Saturday. I will definitely do that one because I want to meet with you guys who I haven't seen in a while or talked with a while. I miss you guys. And I want to see how you're doing and be able to support you if you have anything that you need to bring up and have support around. So again, that's on the 16th of July from 10 Pacific time zone to 11:30 Pacific time zone, and that's in the morning, of course. And it's just a safe space for you to share about anything that, might be on your mind or might be troubling you. And nothing goes outside the group unless permission is asked about that and granted from that person who shared it.
I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website, and I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description, and I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I am looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them and spreading the word more about my podcast. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Today's episode will be an interview with Luke, and it will be in one episode because it was a shorter interview than I usually do with people within VLD. So here is Luke and me. All right. So today I'm here with Luke, who will start by introducing himself, and he is from Wisconsin, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, you can start, Luke.
Hi. So actually, first I'd like to say thank you for the work you're doing and bringing advocacy and awareness to NVLD.
Thank you for saying that.
And anyway, so yeah, my name's Luke and I have ADHD and NVLD.
And how old are you, Luke, if you don't mind sharing that?
I'm 21.
Okay. Yeah, we're about the same age. I'm 25, so I'm a little bit older. And I live in California, and it looks like you're doing some IT work or looking for IT work.
Yes, I'm doing some classes at a local technical college and I'm looking for an IT job.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I can relate to that because I work at my mom's spiritual community and I do some IT support for her as well. So I know what that's like. It's kind of cool to work with tech stuff.
Yeah.
Working with computers and website design is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So do you know when you were diagnosed with NLD and ADHD?
Well, I guess I think it was around early elementary school, about the same time NVLD was the same time I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I believe it was sort of a dual diagnosis of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the reason I was diagnosed with NVLD was because my social difficulties seemed more than what would be related to just ADHD.
That makes sense. That it would be a dual diagnosis. For me, it didn't come up until college because I was homeschooled before college, and it was, I thought I was always different before I had the testing in terms of, and when I say different, I mean different from everybody else in my family in terms of how I thought. And
acted. And when I went to college, I decided to ask my parents if I could get some testing done because I had a roommate who was deaf, and she kind of inspired me to look into it more. And I'm glad I followed that because it was easier to do college with the accommodations that I got
Mhm. Yeah.
with the diagnosis. So if you don't mind sharing, how do you feel about having NLD and ADHD?
Well, I guess I'd say like I don't know if I would have chosen to be this way, but since I am this way, I don't want to be any different. And I like being like this.
Mm-hmm. That's a good answer. No, I don't think anybody chooses to have a learning disability, or as I like to call it, a learning challenge. And I would say that's also true of a physical disability. And you know, I like, sometimes I don't like having an LD, but I I do I do other times I do like it because it makes me who I am, and it it does help with other pieces of life as well. Um, Also, let's see, what differences or challenges do you struggle with since you have ADHD and NLD?
Well, I'd say because of the MVLD, I definitely struggle with motor skills. They're more tricky for me, particularly when I was younger. It's harder for me to have good handwriting and learn to tie my shoes. Took a longer time than. And then I also say, I also have time blindness, I'd say,
Mm-hmm.
is a symptom. I say that that could be related to my MVLD or my ADHD, and it's probably a little of both. But anyway, there's a little of both. I just feel like I just like don't process like the passing of time as like other neurotypicals would per se.
Mm-hmm.
I also would say that math was really hard for me, which could be a combination of both things. Like someone remembering the multiplication facts could have been my ADHD, but I definitely know that like a lot of the math concepts was hard because probably because of my MVLD. I also would say I would struggle with sometimes seeing the big picture and not just seeing the details.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense to me.
I'd also say that ADHD means that like I can't, sometimes makes it hard to focus on details. So I'd say that like when you combine the two, then I just focus on the wrong details. Get distracted by the wrong details.
Mm-hmm.
You get the wrong details. I also like have a hard time picking up on social cues and understanding social rules. And sometimes I can be a black and white thinker.
I think you also had something about tone of voice.
Oh yeah, I know that that's a thing that some MVLDers say that they struggle with. I wouldn't say I struggle with hearing it or like understanding that there's different tones of voices. I'd more struggle with like understanding like with like automatically picking up on like the meaning behind the different tone of voice.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Like I hear that that's different, but I don't know what that means.
That definitely makes sense to me. I can think of an example for me where this was before I knew about my MLD, but I was talking to somebody and I didn't realize I had a snappy tone of voice when I was talking to her. And my mom told me about that later, and I couldn't duplicate the tone of voice I had to her because she was asking me what it sounded like. And I was like, I didn't know what it sounded like. I wasn't aware of it. So I can relate on that. And this is that kind of goes with this. Sometimes my mom will ask me, just because she wants to help me with NLD a lot. She'll see a look on my face. She'll be like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, I don't know what my face looks like, right? And it's like, and like if I did and I was looking in the mirror, I probably would change what it was looking like. So I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, sometimes I relate to that too, about the tone. Like, it's like I can change what I'm saying, but sometimes it's like I have a hard time like controlling what my tone is.
Mm-hmm. It looked like you maybe had a story in here about high school.
Oh yeah, there are some tones of voices I can hear though. I can really understand, and that's like when people are like being infantilizing. Can you ever relate to that? Seems like people like, in regards to your like learning differences or your disability, they'll treat you like you're they'll infantilize you and talk to you like a child.
Mm. Yeah, I can relate to that a little bit because I mean, I don't know if I get that from my family so much, but maybe outside my family, in terms of sometimes maybe they don't understand so much what the learning disability is, and they think they need to talk down to you when they don't really, when they don't.
Yeah.
You're not a child, and most usually you have unique abilities that other people don't, because of being neurodiverse and because of having ADHD and NLD, or having something else. Math is also a challenge for me. I've worked on that, and I've gone faster on that. I don't know if you've listened to the podcast episodes on that, but I had tutors in high school and in college for math, and that was challenging for me for sure.
Mm.
I remember crying over math because it was so difficult.
Yeah.
And I remember skiing as a family sport for my family, and we would do multiplication tables while we were skiing on the chairlift to try to keep me occupied and to try to help me memorize them better. It worked a little bit, but I know sometimes I got annoyed or frustrated. I'm like, again, we have to do these again.
Yeah.
Social cues definitely is the one I think I'm still working on, in terms of reading, still trying to pick up on some body language, and I'm getting a little bit better with facial expressions, in terms of working on people that I know, like my family members, and trying to like analyze, are they looking for something? Like with my mom, sometimes I can tell when she's thinking about something or looking for something that if she needs help, and usually I'm able to help her with that, because I like helping people. So and then
Yeah, sometimes I feel like it's not just picking up on other people's body language. Sometimes I feel like I might struggle with like giving off the proper body language in a social situation too.
Yeah, I can relate with that also. I don't know if you've heard of this book. I know I've mentioned on the podcast before, but NLD from the Inside Out by Michael Brian Murphy. He has NLD himself, and he wrote two books on NLD, and he's I think he did a really good job on writing both books. The first book was about body language and trying to understand it more and social cues, and then the second one was more about the science behind NLD and understanding that. That one was a little trickier for me because of the higher vocabulary and understanding.
Yeah. I'm also excited because I don't know if you've seen them. There's the Instagram account, the Heat NLD Plan. They're like a European group.
Oh,
But
yeah.
they came out with a book. They just haven't come out with their, they're still making their English translation of it.
Yeah, I think I did see that advertised.
Come out with a book, NVLD is okay, but they're still haven't come out with they're still creating their English translation version.
Yeah, I think I did see that. I was like, oh, wait a second, that's not in English. I was like, okay, that's weird. And then, like you were saying, with seeing the big picture and not just seeing the details, I think I still struggle with that a little too sometimes, where sometimes I just I have tunnel vision just on the big on the details and not on the big picture.
Yeah.
When I need to see both or just see the big picture sometimes. And I think I talked about that when I was with my managing money episode. And it is helpful to be able to, especially for young adults, to be able to see the big picture when they have to have a budget and be able to save money and still spend a little bit with, maybe going out and having fun with their friends or something like that.
Yeah.
So I can relate with that too. So let's see, the next question was what it was like for you growing up with NLD and ADHD.
Well, I guess I'd say I think probably because of my NVLD, but I've had social anxiety. I mean, I still do at times. I can be really shy, but if you get me talking about one of my interests, such as Star Wars, I can talk your ear off. I'd say that Star Wars is one of my hyperfixations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me, because I remember, and I think I still do this actually, I remember when I was growing up, I would tend to fixate on things as well. And if I was interested in it, I would talk about it for a long time and I wouldn't notice how long I was talking about it. Mm-hmm. And would get lost in it. And I like Star Wars too. So
yeah.
Do you have a favorite character?
I'm not sure. Maybe like Yoda or Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, I was gonna say it might be a little hard to pick.
Actually, last week I just came back from a trip from Disney. I actually went to go visit the Galaxy's Edge.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which was a trip I finally got to go on after canceling it multiple times due to the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. If I had to pick one character, I think for me, either be Yoda or Leia, probably. Let's see, the next one was, does your family or friends help with your challenges that you have with NLD and ADHD?
I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, my best friend and I really understand each other because she's also autistic and her symptoms present in many similar ways to my neurodivergence. When we hang out together, I feel like I don't have to understand nonverbal cues since neither of us can do that very well. She's actually the reason I realized how similar my NVLD is to what might be considered lower support needs autism, especially the way that it interacts with my coexisting ADHD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that you have your friend with autism, because then you're able to have at least one person who can relate to what it's like to have NLD and ADHD, and hopefully be able to relax a little bit around her, because then, like you were saying, she has some of the same challenges as you do. I worked with in my previous jobs, I've worked with people who have autism and who have ADHD. So I have experience working with those people and seeing how they react and what their behaviors are like, both adults and kids, and actually babies. So I think the youngest was probably 1 year old, and the oldest was 28. Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly. So big range. But I would say for me, I have a very supportive family and friends. And I'm blessed to have that, because I know that's not always the case when you have a learning disability or learning challenge. But my brother and my mom and my dad support me a lot, and so do my friends, and so do my connections with the podcast that I've created, which I think is beautiful. That when I created the podcast over a year ago, it was kind of funny. I didn't think it would help people with NLD as much as it has, but I'm glad that it has. And I guess it might have, I thought maybe it would be tricky for them to find the podcast, but I'm glad it hasn't been. And I'm glad that they have reached out to me and given me feedback and been wanting to been interviewed, because then I've been able to find more people like me and been able to make connections. So that's great. Sorry, that clock is loud.
Yeah, I forgot.
Forgot that clock was in this room.
Yeah.
I'll wait for it to stop ringing.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so let's see. The next one was, are there gifts that you have or strengths that you have from NLD or ADHD?
I'd say that probably because of my in the NVLD, but I say my vocabulary is quite good. As a kid, like I really liked watching like some shows like Word Girl, and I would always pick up on the words that I learned and add them to my vocabulary. I also feel like I was really good at like picking up on like little like facts that they teach on those shows, like Arthur and different things, the different facts that they teach, and that I can still remember some facts that I learned like from shows like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I haven't heard of Word Girl before, but I have heard of the author, and I think for me, I definitely am very verbal, and I'm working on my vocabulary. Sometimes I don't know the meaning of words in shows that more adult shows that I watch now. But the great thing is that I can ask my parents and they can help define it for me.
Yeah.
And most of the time, I don't even have to say what word it is, because they know what word it is, which is great. And I think for me, my other gifts would be in the audio area. For me, I'm very good on remembering audio memory in terms of like memorizing songs and lyrics, and recalling anything that I listen to. And I'm also really good for some reason on names and dates and numbers. Like I remember when I was being tested for my diagnosis, part of the test was recalling a list of numbers that the tester would say to me, and I was able to do that pretty easily, which was interesting. Is there something you wish the world knew more about NLD or ADHD?
I feel like this might be more related to my MBLD, but maybe an ADHD too. But yeah, I wish that people knew that we're not trying to be difficult. We may seem like we're trying to be difficult about the semantics of what you said, but we're just trying to understand it and make sure that we don't like misunderstand it from not picking up on the social cues.
I like that answer. I would agree with that, where, like you said, we're not trying to be difficult. We're just trying to, not just trying to understand it, but trying to understand it, but trying to maybe also defend ourselves and advocate for ourselves, because I know sometimes that can be a little difficult or challenging for people with a learning challenge, because they might not know how to do that exactly. But yeah, I think that's a good answer. We're just trying to work through the problems that we have because of the learning challenge. And then the next one is, do you ever wish you didn't have NLD or ADHD?
No, I don't feel like I ever wish that I didn't have it. I mean, as I said before, I don't know if I'd have chosen to have it, but now that I do, I wouldn't want to be any other way, because I know that this probably like my symptoms of both probably like are fundamentally shaped like how I am as a person and my personality. And I like my personality. I wouldn't want to be any other way.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I would agree with you on that. I wouldn't want to be any different either, because, for me, if I didn't have NLD, I wouldn't be able to do the podcast. And I mean, maybe I would if I knew somebody who has NVLD. But it wouldn't be the same. It would be from a different perspective. And I think that's definitely a good thing for me. One of the good things for me, and it makes me who I am. And I'm glad for that piece.
Yeah, I feel that same way too, that there's just some things that happen like because of like my neurodivergence, because like if I didn't have my neurodivergence, then I wouldn't have gone to a couple years ago, I wouldn't have gone to like the internship program at the local children's hospital for like people with disabilities to learn like job skills, and then I wouldn't have met my best friend, who we're really close now.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's definitely a good example. Do you ever feel like it's a burden or just like a heavy weight for you or for people around you?
I wouldn't say that I feel like my MBLD or ADHD is a burden, but I would say that I feel like it can be hard to deal with at times. And I can't really help it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sometimes there are things that may come up or happen that are hard to control or deal with because of NLD or ADHD for you, and for me it'd be NLD. And I'm starting to believe I have dyslexia, because sometimes when I type I flip-flop letters and words. Like I&E or S&E, which is a little weird that I do that. Because usually I've heard usually it's when you write, but not when you type, but I guess it could be either. And I don't usually do it with numbers, but I do it with letters. This feels like a disability for me too. I have chronic migraines, and that is challenging for me too. So, with those three things for me, it's, a lot can come up, and sometimes it's hard to juggle everything. But yeah, you do the best you can, and that's probably all you can do sometimes. Then let's see, the next one is, what would you tell others who have NLD or ADHD or both as a motivation for when they get discouraged?
When they get discouraged, yeah. Don't let anyone make you feel like your different operating system is wrong or flawed. Your brain just has a different operating system. If someone in your life can't accept that you have a different operating system, then maybe you don't need them in your life. I mean, if that's a choice, if like they're like a friend or someone in your life that you can choose to not have in your life anymore, then maybe they don't need to be.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Sorry, that's my dog.
Yeah, it's okay.
I don't know if you can hear that, but
yeah, it's okay.
But yeah, I would agree with you on that. Like you said, you think differently, and it's not your fault. It's just the way either you were born, or genetics sometimes, or happens from a trauma, can be the other reason. But like you said, if it's a friend or a family member, usually if it's a friend, it's easier to cut them out of your life and stop being friends. With family members, sometimes you have to see them.
Yeah.
Depending on if they're extended family, that's easier. But with immediate family, that's not so easy. But just like you don't choose to have a learning challenge, you don't choose your family. So let's see. What would you tell people who don't know they have NLD or ADHD, but suspect they might?
Well, for the NVLD piece, I tell them that, like, I don't know, I mean, they're suspecting they might have NVLD. I tell them, well, it could be maybe ASD, or maybe NVLD, or it could be both. I mean, I've seen some people online who say they've been diagnosed with both ASD and NVLD.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You can have NVLD and autism, and you can have NVLD and ADHD. So, yeah, and and if you suspect you have a learning challenge, whatever learning challenge you may think you have, I think it would be good to read up on books about it and help educate yourself. And if you can afford the testing, to have that done, because I know sometimes that can be expensive. But to definitely educate yourself and make yourself more aware of what is the definition of that learning challenge. That way you can be more aware of it. Is there anything you would like to ask me?
Um, yeah, I guess you might have answered this before with talking about the Star Wars, but do you have anything now, or have you ever had anything you would consider maybe like you hyperfixated on, like a stronger interest than
Hmm.
like say most neurotypicals would have an interest in something?
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit with Star Wars. I think probably my hyperfixations would be um, anything to do with the environment. I love helping the environment and taking care of the environment. That's one of my passions other than the podcast.
Yeah, I'm interested in that too.
The environment.
Yeah, I'd say like one of my hyperfixations is actually like following like Greta Thunberg and seeing what she does. I
Hmm.
think it's cool what she can do while also being like neurodivergent because she's like on the spectrum. She's neurodivergent.
Cool. Um, and I think one of my other hyperfixations would be probably just talking about facts that I know about things. Like I can get into talking about hummingbirds or butterflies a lot for some reason.
Yeah.
Um, and like when I do when with the podcast talking about facts about NLP as well, I can hyperfixate on that too.
Mm.
Um, and I think also for me with a little bit with the tech work that I do, also sometimes I hyperfixate on that when I'm doing something with a website or trying to teach myself something new in terms of those kind of skills. I might spend too much time on that and trying to learn it. But I think that's not a bad thing. I think that's actually a good thing because it helps me with my job because I do a little bit of social media design and a lot of times my dad will ask me questions that he needs help with in terms of like how to use Google Docs or how to um, open an attachment in an email sometimes that might come in a different form that he's not used to
Yeah.
receiving.
I don't know if this necessarily relates to the question per se, but I'd say with social media, I have I really like the neurodiversity movement, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
say that I recently become aware of that a couple of years ago when I first joined onto Reddit. If you ever heard of Reddit,
Yeah.
well, I first came on Reddit and I found like different communities. Like there's different subreddits, and there's even a specific subreddit for like neurodiversity.
Mm-hmm.
I like posting in there, and then there's also an NVLD Reddit page.
That's cool. I didn't know there was that on Reddit.
Yeah, and then I just recently, just like yesterday, there was like an ADHD meme page and there was an Aspie meme page for like autistic people, which was like similar enough that I guess I posted in there. But yeah, I just recently created my own Reddit subreddit. I created an NVLD Reddit meme page for people to post memes about NVLD.
yeah, that's good. Um, I know one thing that I found recently, I don't know if you've heard of it before, but it's basically it's a blog called The Mighty, where you can post about learning disabilities or physical disabilities that you may have. And I like going on there because you can read about things like NLD or autism or ADHD, and you can read about people's experiences with having them. And you don't have to comment on the blog or write a blog yourself, but you can just read them and connect with other people who have something that you have.
Yeah.
And then I believe the last question is, what is your proudest accomplishment?
I don't know if I'd say this is a personal accomplishment, but I'd say that one of my proudest accomplishments is being an uncle to my niece.
Mm-hmm. How old is your niece?
She's a little over 2 years old now.
Aw, they're so cute when they're young.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, not that they're cute when that they're not cute when they're older, but they're usually cuter as kids.
Yeah.
um, let's see. For me, I have a lot of accomplishments I can think of, but usually I still reflect back on when I graduated from college, and I'm sure you can relate to this as going through college now. It School was not easy for me.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare, and that's the best word I can use to describe it. Like sometimes when people ask me, would I go back? I'm like, no, not if I had a choice. And I do have a choice. You know, um, it was not easy. I'm surprised I did it in 4 years. But I know I did that because I had a lot of help. I had some tutors at the school at UC Berkeley where I went, and I had my mom helping me for the last 2 years with editing all my essays I did, which were a lot because I was a sociology major. So, I think one thing that I learned in college that was a good thing was I learned that I needed to ask for help and that I should not be ashamed for that, because it was actually, I used to think that was a sign of weakness, but I actually realized that was a sign of strength, because if you realize you need help, then you are realizing something more about yourself. And that you are realizing that sometimes it takes some strength to ask for help,
Yeah.
depending on what kind of help it is. So, and I think that's true for people who have learning challenges. So,
Yeah. I think I came up with another one for what might be an accomplishment.
mhm.
Say maybe like, I think it's cool that I got some like sales on my Redbubble. Have you heard of Redbubble?
I don't think so. What is that?
It's like a print on demand thing where you make designs and things.
Oh, cool.
You sell designs, and I've got some other sales in like other countries. I have a Redbubble account. You can find me under L.Cash. You can see
Mhm.
my store, but I have all a bunch. I just have like just a few designs, but they're all like neurodivergent themed designs relating to like being neurodivergent.
Oh, okay. That sounds cool. I'll look for that.
Mm.
That sounds interesting. I hadn't heard of that before. Okay. Well, that's basically it, unless you wanted to ask me anything else.
No, I can't think of anything offhand. Nice talking to you.
And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also, see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.